Right. Yeah. Sarat garu, now you are online, live.
Okay. ముందు
Give
మీరు
me,
ఇంట్రడ్యూస్ చేస్తారు.
yeah, let me introduce to the participants.
Okay.
Good afternoon, all the participants. Welcome back to the afternoon session. The lecture, now the present speaker is Dr. Sarat Kannepalli. He is an environmentalist scientist currently working with the German Development Agency GIZ on climate change adaptation and finance in rural India. His previous experience includes working to quantify economic and environmental benefits associated with the improved agriculture value chain process. They have more than 10,000 small and marginal scale farms in Bihar state, India. He has a PhD in environmental sciences from Rutgers, the State University of New Jersey in USA, and MS in environmental sciences from Stephen F. Austin State University, Texas, USA. His areas of research interest includes implementation of climate-smart agriculture practices, estimating agriculture greenhouse gas emissions, surface water quality issues, and biological waste treatment technologies. The recipient of New Jersey Water Environment Association's Kenneth Stoller Award for research excellence in solid hazard and hazardous waste management. Recipient of John J. Logrosa Award for research in excellence in water quality control and environmental protection. So this is his credentials. Today's speaker, Dr. Sarat Kannepalli, and he will try to give you some knowledge and some experiences on this climate change and agriculture adaptation systems, and if possible, he will also try to give you some case studies. Now, I think it is over to Dr. Sarat Kannepalli. You please go ahead. This one.
Thank you, Professor Reddy, for the introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. And I'm currently working with a German development agency called GIZ. And the work we do is for the Indian national government. And as part of meeting IPCC's requirements of Indian government through state action plans on climate change, the central government is implementing certain adaptation activities all over the country. And GIZ is a partner with the central government in planning, implementation, and financing of climate adaptation initiatives all over India. And as part of these initiatives, and as an advisor for this organization, I'm involved in developing monitoring and evaluation methodologies for climate adaptation activities that are being carried out in 2 states, those 2 states being Uttar Pradesh and Himachal Pradesh. Those 2 states are where I'm currently focusing on. Prior to this work, I was a scientist with an international NGO called Environmental Defense Fund. And here, what I did was I was part of a team that was trying to show that economic benefits do not have to go contrary to environmental benefits. What we tried showing is improving the agricultural value chain efficiency across 10,000 small and marginal scale farmers would also improve the environment. And that work I have done for more than 3 years in the state of Bihar. And today's topic that I'm going to present will be slightly different from what you all have heard in the past 3 days, mainly because the focus of presentations in the past 3 days was how climate change is affecting water resources. While my focus for today's topic would be on how agriculture and management of water resources in India can have a beneficial effect on climate change, specifically focusing on Indian context. I hope you would find this topic interesting. And the title of my topic is Climate Change Mitigation Options in India, in Indian Agriculture. So you all know that agriculture and climate change have a reciprocal relationship. What I mean by reciprocal relationship is agriculture both contributes to climate change, and agriculture is also adversely affected by climate change. In this slide on the left, in the flow chart, I tried showing how unsustainable agricultural practices result in emission of different greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, and the resulting impacts due to global warming will have an adverse effect on crop production, livestock productivity, and biodiversity. So I also included a picture on the right, and if you can guess, it's a locust infestation that we have been hearing a lot these days. It actually started in Eastern African countries, and it moved via Pakistan, Western India, and it came as close to us as Maharashtra and Orissa, and there was even some concern that it would enter Telangana and Andhra Pradesh too. And this locust infestation is caused due to prolonged bouts of exceptionally wet weather and cyclones that have been occurring in parts of Eastern Africa for the past 18 months to 2 years. Ironically, these locusts are called desert locusts, but they thrive in wet conditions. So when you have these untimely and unseasonal increase in rainfall, they have increased in numbers and they have become a serious problem this year compared to previous years. So I just wanted to show this to show how changing climate can have an adverse effect on agriculture. It's a good recent example for this scenario. And the pie chart at the bottom of the screen shows you the percentages of GHG emissions on a global scale from different sources. And on global scale, net GHG emissions from agriculture, forestry, and other land uses sector, other land use sector is only next to energy sector. It's almost 24% of the total greenhouse gas emissions globally. So a little bit about background on India's national GHG emissions. Even though the per capita GHG emissions from India are quite low, but on a cumulative scale, India is the third largest greenhouse gas emitter in the world, only after USA and China. So we can't shun our responsibility by saying that our per capita GHG emissions are quite low, so we don't have much responsibility in controlling it. Mainly because we are on a total scale, we are a major contributor to GHG emissions all over the world. And as part of India's UN IPCC pledge, India has pledged to cut its emission intensity of its GDP by 35% by 2030 compared to its 2005 level. Just to give a brief idea on what is a GDP emission intensity, it's the intensity of the volume of emissions per unit of gross domestic product. So reducing emissions intensity that means less pollution is being created for each unit of gross domestic product. As we know, agriculture is a major contributor to total GHG emissions from India. It contributes to almost to 18% of India's GHG emissions. So reducing GHG emissions from agriculture sector plays an important role in overall India's goal of cutting its emission intensity of its GDP. So here I tried to show India's GHG emissions specifically from agriculture sector. So the pie chart on the left shows contributions of various sectors to GHG emissions in India. And as you can see, next to energy, agriculture is the major contributor. And on the right, the bar graph on the right shows that among different sources of greenhouse gas emissions, for example, energy, industrial process, and agriculture. Agriculture is the major contributor for two major greenhouse gases, which are methane and carbon dioxide. Agriculture is the major source of methane and nitrous oxide, while industry and energy sources are the major contributors to carbon dioxide, which is another major greenhouse gas that we all know. So this slide shows India's total national GHG emissions by crop and by state. And if you look at the bar graph on the left, you can see that more than 80% of India's GHG emissions from agriculture sector are from four major crops. They are rice, wheat, sugarcane, and cotton. Can anybody guess why majority of the greenhouse gases are from these four crops? Yeah, as you might have guessed, these four crops are the most resource intensive in terms of water usage. And this is the reason why you tend to see most of the greenhouse gas emissions from these four crops. Rice, especially rice, sugarcane, and cotton are require a lot of irrigation, and frequency of irrigation is quite high, and also they require a lot of water. And if you look at the India map on the right, agriculture emissions from different states, you can see that total emissions from crop production were highest in the combined state of Andhra Pradesh. The states in red, combined states of Andhra Pradesh, followed by Uttar Pradesh, Maharashtra, followed by West Bengal, Madhya Pradesh, and Punjab. And higher total emissions from these states is mainly due to large areas in these states being under crop cultivation. So this is a slide showing state-wise distribution of GHG emissions by crop. And as you can see, for paddy, the most emissions, majority of the emissions are from Andhra Pradesh, followed by West Bengal, Assam, and Tamil Nadu. And paddy emissions were also relatively higher in the states such as Uttar Pradesh, Karnataka, and Orissa. And higher emissions from states such as Andhra Pradesh is mainly due to larger areas in these states being under paddy cultivation. And for wheat, you can see it's mostly the northern states where wheat is grown the most, such as Uttar Pradesh, Punjab, and to some extent Haryana. And for sugarcane, it's mostly from Maharashtra, followed by Gujarat and Andhra Pradesh. And cotton, it's again Maharashtra, followed by Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, and Andhra Pradesh. Similarly, higher crop emissions in states such as Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh, and Uttar Pradesh were mainly due to larger area under cotton and sugarcane. So this is a slide showing GHG emission intensity by crop and by state. So emission intensity is the kilogram of carbon dioxide per kg of carbon dioxide equivalent per kg of grain produced. So the difference between this slide and the previous slide is that in the previous slide, that slide number 6, the previous slide talks about total GHG emissions, which is dependent on extent of area under agricultural production, while this slide talks about emissions per kg of production. So here the emission intensity is dependent on productivity, how much yield is there per unit area of field. So if you see even though the paddy is grown for the most part in states such as Andhra Pradesh, West Bengal, Punjab, the emission intensity is highest in Himachal Pradesh. And followed by Uttarakhand, Kerala, Assam, and Karnataka. Similarly, even though the wheat is grown mostly in Uttar Pradesh, the emission intensity from wheat is highest in states such as Chhattisgarh, followed by Himachal Pradesh, Jharkhand, and Maharashtra. And when it comes to sugarcane, all the sugarcane producing states have similar emission intensities. So just to give an idea that even though states actually growing the crop in maximum area is different from states having maximum emission intensity, from that difference you can actually say that there is a difference in productivity between states. For example, emission intensity in Himachal Pradesh is mainly due to lower productivity per unit area. So now, so what are the solutions? What do we need to do to cut down these emissions? Because agriculture is a major contributor to GHG emissions, and the Indian government has decided that they would like to cut emissions from agriculture sector so that the pledge that they made to UN IPCC would be satisfied. So some of the measures is following climate smart agriculture practices, increasing productivity, thereby meeting the food demand while cutting GHG emissions can be done by following different agricultural practices, and these different sets of agricultural practices can be called as climate smart agricultural practices. So we need to think in terms of climate smart agricultural practices mainly because just increasing yield is not enough at this point, or just increasing farm profits is not enough. And without concern about yield and profit, you can't just focus on climate impact. You need to take into account all these three factors. Only then you can have a sustainable result. So we need to adopt agricultural practices that can mitigate GHG emissions without compromising food security. That is the goal. So according to Food and Agricultural Organization, climate smart agricultural practices are any practices that can sustainably increase yield and farm income while improving resilience to climate change and at the same time reduce GHG emissions. Any practice that can satisfy these conditions can be classified as climate smart agricultural practices. And as India has identified agriculture as one of the priority areas for GHG emission reduction, to meet its nationally determined contributions, focusing on solutions of this kind would be very relevant. And India has the potential to cut its annual GHG emissions arising from agriculture, which is 18% of its total GHG emissions. And there are many agricultural practices that can potentially be grouped as climate smart agricultural practices, but in a recent study by International Maize and Wheat Improvement Center, they have found that practicing just 3 important agricultural practices can cut GHG emissions greater than 50% from agriculture sector. And the 3 important practices that they identified are water management in paddy cultivation, efficient fertilizer usage, and adoption of low or zero tillage practices. And in the next few slides, I will talk briefly about these practices. So first is water management in rice, and it is one of the most important farm management practices that has an impact on GHG emission reduction from agriculture sector. We know that paddy is grown in continuously flooded conditions, and this is a major expenditure for the farmer, and also this kind of paddy growth is also a major contributor to methane emissions. And continuously flooding the soils and keeping the soil under flooded conditions for a long time actually adversely affect soil health and soil fertility. So some of the practices that have been suggested by International Rice Research Institute that would cut down on crop costs and also improve environment is practicing intermittent irrigation practices such as alternate wetting and drying. And in their study, they found that intermittent irrigation instead of continuously flooding the fields can cut methane emissions by 50% and also would reduce water needs by 30%. And in addition to practicing alternate wetting and drying, introduction of more efficient irrigation practices such as sprinklers, rain gauge, and drip irrigation can improve farm profits with environmental benefits. However, increased energy usage involved in irrigation practices such as the sprinklers and rain gauge can be negated through the use of non-conventional energy sources such as solar energy. Excuse me. So solar energy is being encouraged throughout India. Usage of solar energy in irrigation is being encouraged throughout India through central government schemes such as Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana, which encourages improvements and investments in improving water use efficiency in agricultural irrigation, and Pradhan Mantri Kusum, which encourages use of solar pumps for irrigation. So actually, efforts in this direction have been put in place, and they have been included in 2020 and 2021 Union financial budget. So other practices that we have tried on field are fertigation. It's an effective water and nutrient management practice with considerable mitigation potential. And fertigation, as you know, is the injection of fertilizers used for soil amendments along with irrigation systems. So this has several benefits, including farm economics and also environment. I'll talk more about this in the next slide. So this slide actually shows map of India with spatial distribution of GHG mitigation potential associated with improved water management practices. As you can see, most of the reductions from water management practices can be achieved from Telangana, Andhra, Tamil Nadu, and Orissa. And the high GHG emissions from these states due to agricultural water usage and potential for mitigation from efficient water management practices in these states is mainly due to high fuel usage used for pumping groundwater, and groundwater levels in these states are quite deep, uh, and also because puddled or flooded paddy cultivation is practiced in these states. This is the main reason why there is a huge scope for reduction in GHG emissions from efficient water management practices, mainly from these states. So yeah, the next few slides deal with fertilizer use efficiency and low tillage practices. Though these practices don't have direct connection with water management, as you know, fertilizer application is dependent on irrigation practices, and also low tillage practices involve lower frequency of irrigations. So though they don't have direct relationship water management practices, they are still related to water management in agriculture. So I'll talk briefly about these. So the ones that I listed here are the ones that we have put into practice during our project work in Bihar. So I included them. Of course, I couldn't include the data from this work mainly because we are working on a journal publication, and I'm not yet allowed to include that data. So I'm just giving an idea on what we have done and why we have done. And so this is the second management practice that has an important effect on reduction in GHG emissions from Indian agriculture, that is nutrient or fertilizer use efficiency. Nutrient or fertilizer use efficiency is the fraction of nutrient taken by the plant and removed at the time of harvest out of the total that has been added to the field. And it has been shown that India's nutrient use efficiency is quite low compared to other developed countries. So I'll tell you why improving nutrient use efficiency is good both for farm economics and environment now. For example, just to give an example, the desirable ratio of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium is 4:2:1. This is the ratio that is advised by the agriculture scientists to be applied on the fields. But to give an example, in Punjab, it is 31:8:1. So it's easily deducible that the ratio is heavily skewed towards nitrogenous fertilizers. One important effect of skewed fertilizer ratio is that whatever is being added extra or whatever is being added unnecessarily is lost to the environment as a pollutant, and it can be lost either to the atmosphere, or it can be lost to hydrosphere, or it can be lost to the land. And nitrogenous, as you all know, nitrogenous fertilizers are the main source of nitrous oxide, which is a highly potent greenhouse gas, which is almost 300 times more potent than carbon dioxide. And what is lost during rains and runoff enters into freshwater bodies and causes eutrophication. You all know about eutrophication, and also, and if this water is used as this drinking water, and high concentrations of nitrates in drinking water can cause blue baby syndrome or methanoglobinemia, which actually prevents hemoglobin from absorbing oxygen in the blood. So there are several health effects, environmental effects, in addition to wastage of money that you spend on using these fertilizers. So what is the prime reason why in India we use such a skewed fertilizer ratios, which is skewed heavily towards nitrogenous fertilizers? The prime reason being heavy subsidies from the government for nitrogenous fertilizers. Nitrogenous fertilizers for long have been subsidized, and people tend to buy nitrogenous fertilizers more than phosphorus or potassium fertilizers. And this has led to the excessive use of urea in agriculture all over India. And in fact, the share of urea usage among all nitrogenous fertilizer is highest in India, which is at 80%, while it is 23% in USA and European Union, and 54% in Brazil and 46% in China. So in general, nitrogen use efficiency of crops is very low in India. That is about 30% compared to other countries. And this shows that there is a great potential for GHG mitigation through improved nutrient use efficiency by adopting various approaches of precision nutrient management, which I will be talking about in the next slides. So here I tried to give a brief introduction on what is nitrogen use efficiency, what is nitrogen surplus. So the schematic in the schematic on the left, the blue arrows on the left show the sources of nitrogen inputs to the agricultural field, which include nitrogenous fertilizer that is added as part of chemical fertilizers by the farmer, and nitrogen added to the field as part of biological nitrogen fixation in the soil, and nitrogen added as part of animal manure, and minor quantities of nitrogenous compounds that are added to the field from atmosphere. Even though it's a minor quantity, but there is still contribution from atmosphere with regard to different forms of nitrogen. So these are the inputs that are that go into a field, nitrogenous inputs that go into the field. And the arrows in red on the top and bottom are nitrogen losses from the field. The one on the top is nitrogenous losses through volatilization in the form of ammonia, nitric oxide, nitrogen oxide, dinitrogen, and also nitrous oxide. So, and excess nitrogen is also lost as runoff and leaching, and it is lost in the forms of ammonia and nitrates and dissolved oxygen, organic nitrogen, and particulate organic nitrogen. So these all either go into streams and receiving water bodies, or they go into the next field, or they stay on the earth. So these are the inputs and these are the losses, and the green arrow is what is taken up by the plant and is harvested along with the crop. So the equation on the right, so just to give an idea, so it is best for farm economics and also for environment when you have a situation where what is being added, majority of what is being added to the field is taken up by the plant. That is the best situation, because whatever is not being taken by the plant is lost to the environment, which is a pollutant, and it is harmful to the environment, and also it is wastage of money. So as you can see on the equation on the right, nitrogen surplus is what is being lost to the environment from what is added to the fields. So you need to minimize nitrogen surplus and improve nitrogen efficiency. So nitrogen efficiency, as you can see, the equation at the bottom is what is being taken up by the plant divided by what is being added to the field. So this is just a brief idea on what is nitrogen use efficiency and nitrogen surplus. So this is again a map of spatial distribution of mitigation potential due to efficient fertilizer usage. And as you can see, there is a huge potential to improve nitrogen use efficiency in states such as Uttar Pradesh, which is in red, followed by the Telangana and Andhra Pradesh. So I just here listed out different ways in which we can improve fertilizer or nitrogen use efficiency in India. And so they call them 4 R's. The 4 R's are applying the fertilizer in the right form, applying it at right time, and applying it at right rate and at right place. So I'll just describe what these are next. So the main reasons for low fertilizer use efficiency in India are due to 2 main reasons: blanket recommendations and inefficient methods of fertilizer application. So blanket recommendations result in over and under application of fertilizers, and these blanket recommendations are followed mainly because of lack of enough information to farmers. So they would just be following whatever they heard about the dosages from their fathers or forefathers or what is being practiced by neighbors. So they don't know anything that is specific for their field or for the crop. So they just apply a blanket fertilizer. And it has been going on for centuries, and this is something that's results in over or under application of fertilizers, and over application results in wastage of money and harm to the environment, and under application results in lower productivity. So some of the ways this blanket recommendations can be avoided is through advisory on site-specific nutrient management, and different agricultural research institutes such as International Rice Research Institute and International Plant Nutrition Institute. They have easy to use methodologies to calculate what is the right nutrient requirement based on their field conditions, farm management practices, and farm history. And these can be easily used by, even by non-technical persons. And the second one is inefficient methods of application, and this includes both wrong form of fertilizer application and also wrong method of application. When I say wrong method of application, it involves broadcasting on the surface, where there is a high percentage of loss through volatilization or through water. And wrong form of application is wrong chemical combination. For example, applying fertilizer only in the form of urea results in high losses through volatilization. So they have suggested practices like urea coated with neem, which actually releases urea in an incremental slow release form, which reduces the volatilization. And also they have suggested practices such as fertigation, actually mixing the fertilizer along with irrigation water, so that fertilizer reaches the crop roots easily with minimal loss. So these are some of the practices that have been suggested and that are being put into use all over India through government schemes. So here I just listed few points on what policy changes are needed for improving the fertilizer use efficiency. These being the Union Finance Minister has specifically mentioned during 2020-21 budget that they'll be putting emphasis on encouraging balanced use of all fertilizers, including traditional organic fertilizers. Usage of organic fertilizers not only contains essential plant nutrients, but also increases soil organic carbon. And biofertilizers are other products that can be profitable to industry and farmers while being less harmful to the environment. And city or urban compost is another good option. City compost contains 17 essential elements for soil health, and it has not been encouraged to an optimum level. So moving to the final way how you can reduce GHG emissions from agricultural practices is low or no tillage practices. We all know that we tend to in Indian agriculture we tend to till the agricultural land several times before we actually sow. So this over-tilling or over-plowing has several detrimental effects both for the environment and also for farm economics, mainly because it costs a lot to plow the field using a tractor, and also it involves a lot of labor if he's actually using bullock cart to plow the field. And also it disturbs the soil aggregates, and it disturbs the soil microbiology, which affects the soil health. So decreasing the number of tills or altogether doing away with tillage improves soil health, and also it also decreases water usage, because farmers tend to use less number of irrigations and also less water when they do low or no tillage compared to high tillage practices. So it offers GHG mitigation by enhancing carbon sequestration, because when you don't disturb soils, they can hold more carbon. So Government of India is actually encouraging zero tillage or low tillage in wheat, and direct seeded rice in paddy in Indo-Gangetic plains on the northeastern border containing Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, West Bengal, Jharkhand states. And it is gaining ground, these practices, and it is showing quite a good results, both in terms of saving money, saving resources, and also improving environment. So finally, to conclude, so the three management practices that have the most positive effect on environment and farm economics are improved water management practices, improved fertilizer usage, improved fertilizer efficiency, and low tillage practices. And all these measures are annual measures, which means they do not require more than once a year commitment on the part of farmers. So that is another benefit of implementing these practices. And when it comes to what factors actually increases the uptake of these suggestions among farmers, it's mainly dependent on socio-political environment under which a farmer community operates. For example, because urea subsidy is high and it is cheap, fertilizer usage is heavily skewed towards usage of nitrogenous fertilizer. So a policy intervention is required for change in practices such as these. So the setting in which a farmer operates especially the socio-political environment, plays a major role in taking up these practices. And finally, government of India need to take a carrot and stick approach. What I mean by that is government needs to incentivize farmers through a combination of appropriate policy measures and incentives to ensure wide-scale adaptation of these mitigation options, and need to penalize farmers in such a way that they are discouraged from taking up practices that are not good for the environment and also for the crop net profits. So these are some of the things. I gave a superficial idea on some of the things that we have put in place for more than 10,000 farmers in the state of Bihar. And we have collected data for almost 3 years for these practices. And also we collected data from farmers who have not followed these practices, like a baseline study. And we tried comparing between these two sets of farmers to see how much economic and environmental benefit has accrued to these farmers who have implemented these practices. And while quantifying economic benefits is straightforward, quantifying environmental benefits are not so. So we used certain internationally approved GIZ estimation methodologies that would take into account farm management practices, irrigation practices, fertilizer usage, and such information to actually calculate GIZ emission reductions between farmers who have implemented these practices and farmers who have not. And that data is being analyzed and is in the process of being documented. So once the paper is out, yeah, I'll definitely share it with you all. And yeah, that's all about my presentation. Thank you once again. Thank you for hearing my talk, and thank you, Dr. Reddy, for the opportunity once again. Any questions? Yeah, please. Hello. Hello, Dr. Reddy.
Sir?
Yes, sir. Yeah, my presentation is over.
Yes, sir. Wait few minutes, sir. Questions also there, sir.
Yes, sir. Any questions or comments, sir? So I have a question from Mr. S.K. Das. Can you hear me, sir? In zero tillage upland paddy, weed infestation will be more and reduce the yield. Dear Mr. Das, can you hear me? So Professor Reddy, sir. Sir, I have a question from Mr. Das. So do I just answer it vocally or do I send a message? I think you are muted, sir.
Yeah, you give him orally.
Okay, sir. Okay, yeah. So, Mr. Das, it is true that weed infestation is high in zero tillage, mainly because under puddled conditions, the conditions are not favorable for weed growth. So when in zero tillage, since there is no puddled condition, there is a problem with weed infestation, and also there is a reduced yield. But the reduced yield, I'll answer about the weed infestation later. But for the reduced yield, I will answer it. So the compilation of studies on reduced yield has shown that the decrease in the total input costs for the whole crop is more favorable than the percentage of reduction in yield. So in zero tillage, you tend to spend quite a bit lower than what you spend in puddled rice. So the decrease in yield is taken care of by the decrease in total input costs. So that is not a problem, and it has been answered. So with the weed infestation, the most important thing is applying the weedicides at the right time for zero tillage. That is a very important step that needs to be taken care of. And any delay in weedicide application can have yield penalty. So it's true that weed infestation is high in zero tillage, but it is a quite proven step in the zero tillage that it can be controlled by applying weedicide at the right time. So yes, zero tillage is being practiced in almost all crops now, and definitely in pulse production it can be included, and it will definitely reduce the input costs, and also it is good for the environment. It can definitely be practiced in pulse production too. Yes, Mr. Das, I understood. You meant to say weed infestation, not weed infestation. Yeah, I got it. I hope I answered that. Mr. Nagendra Prasad has asked, is climate smart agriculture reduces water consumption? Yes, sir. Climate smart agricultural practices includes all practices that involve resource use efficiency. And one of the resource use efficiency practices that is included in climate smart agriculture practices is the water management practices, improving the water use efficiency, and low tillage practices, where you tend to use less water and you tend to avoid puddled conditions in the fields. So water consumption is definitely reduced in climate smart agriculture practices, and International Rice Research Institute has suggested the methodology alternate wetting and drying, which reduces the water consumption, which reduces water usage quite a bit. If you can look into alternate wetting and drying, you will find more information on to what extent water usage can be reduced by following alternate wetting and drying. Yeah, Mr. Das has asked an important question on, without applying chemical fertilizers to the high-yielding variety, is it possible to feed the increasing population of India? That's a very, very useful and important question, Mr. Das. We all must have heard about zero budget natural farming in Andhra Pradesh, especially. It has been taken up on a large scale all over the state. And the main idea on which this zero budget natural farming works is you don't use chemical fertilizers at all, and you use only the formulations made from organic compounds such as cow dung and several other manures. and they have actually hired a group of scientists from James Hutton Institute in England who have collected enough information from all over Andhra Pradesh, several thousands of farms. They have collected information to see is it possible to um, is it possible to maintain food security without using chemical fertilizers, because zero budget natural farming doesn't involve any chemical fertilizers. And they have recently published an article in Journal of Nature Sustainability, the #1 journal in sustainability, nature sustainability, and they said that without using chemical fertilizers, it is not possible to maintain yields in high intense crops. It might be possible to get enough yields in small farm, low intensive crops, but if you want to feed the whole India or the population that you expect to see in the next 50 countries, their observation was that chemical fertilizers organic fertilizers supplemented with chemical fertilizers are the way to go. So yeah, you need to find a balance. You can't just use only chemical fertilizers, or you can't have food security with only using organic fertilizers. You need to find a balance. That's my understanding. And this has been reiterated by the work that James Hutton Institute in England has done on zero budget natural farming work based on the work in Andhra Pradesh. So I hope I answered that question. And Mr. Rangarao has asked which gases are released by the burning of crop residues. It's mostly carbon dioxide, sir. And also, if it involves incomplete burning, there might be some carbon monoxide and methane too, but mostly it's carbon dioxide. And Mr. Farooq Ahmad, can we trap methane from the filed suggestion? Okay, so can we trap methane from the fields? Okay, so maybe what Mr. Farooq Muhammad meant was, can we actually trap the methane that is emanating from puddled rice fields and use that methane as a source of energy? I'm guessing that's what he meant. So yes, so there have been several experiments done on the field to measure methane fluxes from rice paddies, and those experiments were mainly meant to measure methane fluxes. They were not meant for actually utilizing the methane as a source of energy, because the concentrations that you expect to see are quite low, even though the quantities would be high when you take into account the extent of agricultural cultivation all over the world. But when you see the fluxes, they would be very low. So getting enough to use it as an energy source might be difficult. Yeah, I didn't hear about any example in literature saying that they actually captured methane from fields to use it as an energy. So because it's spread over a large area, capturing enough might be a problem.
Dr. Sarat, we will wait few more seconds. People may be typing their text.
Sure, sir. Sure, sir.
Yeah, see the question.
Yes, sir. So Mr. Das has asked, in India, most of the cow dung is used for fuel purpose. Besides, cow and other animals are decreasing due to mechanization. From where we shall get such high amount of bulky organic manures? That's a very good point that Mr. Das has raised. Forget about in urban areas, even in rural areas, finding enough organic manure has been a problem. And also I can give you the concentration of nitrogen found in a bag of urea. To substitute that, you need to use at least 2-3 truckloads of manure, because nitrogen is not concentrated as much as in manure as much as it is in a urea bag. So you need to use huge quantities, and finding enough organic matter is a huge problem. And that is one reason why I'm saying that balancing food security and depending on only organic matter to grow crops might not be a practical way to go, in my view. And Andhra Pradesh government has put a lot of effort into zero budget natural farming, and it has given a very useful information on in which direction to go. I hope the work and the results are made public, and it should lead to more in-depth discussion. And just to reiterate to what Mr. Das was saying, National Academy of Agricultural Sciences, it's the national body that represents the agricultural scientists all over the country, has rejected the logic behind zero budget natural farming. Sure, Mr. Das. Yeah, you're asking. You have 3 more questions about climate change in the chat. Yeah, please. You can have my email ID too, and you can email me too, if that is convenient for you.
Yeah. Das, I request Das, you communicate with Dr. Sarat Kannepalli in detail. Let us have others also the clarifications or any queries.
Mr. William Edwin has asked, there are a lot of gases emitted in sewage treatment plants, and could this be used in fertilizer? Mr. Edwin, I can answer this question briefly, but you will have more details tomorrow in Dr. Prakasam Tata's presentation. He is an expert on this area, and I have gone through his slides, and he has very good information on the question you have asked. So to give a brief answer to your question, actually, it has been tried to convert nitrogen compounds that are being released from water treatment plants, wastewater treatment plants, as fertilizer. More than the gases, it is the sludge that is accumulated after wastewater. I believe you have an understanding on the wastewater treatment plant, wastewater treatment, and the solids that are left after the wastewater treatment are treated, and there are several ways to treat it. And after the treatment, once it satisfies certain conditions, it can be used as a fertilizer, and it is being used as a fertilizer in most of the European and North American countries. It's a very, very good source of fertilizer. The biosolids are the sludge that has been treated to certain requirements. There are certain rules that it needs to satisfy before it can be used as a fertilizer. And about the gases and more details about the biosolids and sludge, there is a talk tomorrow in the morning, right, sir, Dr. Reddy? Dr.
Yes,
Prakash
morning
is
9:30. Morning
9:30.
9.
Yeah, he has more than 40 years of experience at the world's largest wastewater treatment plant in Chicago, and he'll be presenting. And he's an expert on that. He has more than 40 years of experience in that work, and he'll be able to answer you in more detail. So Mr. Nagendra Prasad is asking if there is rise in temperature and precipitation is low, then how climate smart agriculture becomes effective? That is a very good question. So there is a concept called resilience to climate change or adaptation to climate change. So whatever you do, so climate smart agriculture includes practices that improves resilience to climate change and also adaptation to climate change, and improving soil health and utilizing less water resources, and also improving fertilizer use efficiency. These all come under the concepts of improving the adaptation to climate change, and these practices would actually allow you to grow crops even in situations where the climate is not favorable. So improving the soil health by low tillage practices allows crops to grow in situations where rainfall is not optimum. For example, if you improve soil health by using mulch, or if you improve soil health by improving its organic carbon, it holds more water, and it allows crops to grow even when there is lower rainfall. And same with raised temperatures. If the field is mulched, the seeds can withstand higher temperatures. So improving resilience and adaptation is one way to handle adverse climate conditions. So Mr. Mr. Kasetti Nagaraj Setti has asked, is it useful for 5G network for climate change? So yeah, ICT technologies, information and communication technologies, that I'm assuming that is what you meant by 5G network. Yes, improving knowledge network and helping farmers have access to more knowledge. All these come under improving the resilience and climate adaptation of farmers who are involved. So definitely, technology information has a big role to play in handling or withstanding climate change. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah. If no further questions, let us thank Dr. Kannepalli, Sarat Kannepalli. But his very extensive talk and information on agriculture, smart agriculture in changing climate scenarios. But we are happy that even though all his knowledge are gained in abroad, US and other countries, but he is implementing in India, that we should appreciate his efforts, sharing his knowledge in India. Thank you very much, sir, being with us.
Sir.
I know GIZ, German Development Agency, they're very busy with the reports and all those field works. But even then, you could try to squeeze out some time and spare some time with us, giving some knowledge and smart agriculture systems. But everything is going smart. Agriculture should also go smart.
Yes, sir. Yes.
That is right. Yeah. But it is very interesting. See, I must say that Okay. Let me thanks first, and then we will discuss after that. Thank you very much, sir, on behalf of the participants and also on behalf of the co-convener. Co-convener is Dr. Jairam Reddy is there on the live.
Hello, sir.
Uh,
Good afternoon.
Sir, good afternoon, sir.
He is the Chief Executive Officer in AP Science City. This is chaired by the Honorable Chief Minister.
Professor Munreddy, we lost you. I'm not able to hear you. I don't know if it is a problem on my side or yours, but I'm not able to hear you.
But my is we are on unmute side.
Yeah, yes, sir. Yeah, I can hear you now. Yeah.
Yeah, Dr. Jairam Reddy is the Chief Executive Officer.
Okay, yes, sir.
AP Science City, who's where the chairman of this center is the Honorable Chief Minister.
Okay.
We are the mandate of this center is to popularize and distribute the knowledge, science among the younger generation, and they should also. I think Jairam Reddy sir will elaborate more on this.
Sure, sir.
Charan garu, please stop the live.
Sir, thank you, sir.
Charan garu, please stop the live. Charan garu, please stop the live.